Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the 34th webinar in the Offshore Wind Series, Learning from the Experts. I am Kate McClellan-Press, a Senior Project Manager on NYSERDA's Environmental Research Team, and it's my pleasure to be joined by today's experts, Mary Ford with MARACOOS and Karl Vilacoba with Monmouth University and the Mid-Atlantic Ocean Data Portal. Before I introduce our speakers, a few reminders for participants and some background on this webinar series. Next slide, please. First, if you are experiencing any technical issues, please contact Sal Graven at the email address on the bottom of this slide. This webinar is being recorded, and the recordings and presentation slides for all webinars in the Learning from the Experts series are available on NYSERDA's website at the address on this slide. All participants have been muted. We will have time for Q&A following the presentation, so please use the Q&A function to submit your questions for the speaker. Next slide, please. New York State is working to advance the responsible and cost-effective development of at least 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind by 2035. Offshore wind is a critical component in achieving the state's goals of 70% renewable sources of electricity by 2030 and 100% zero emissions electricity by 2040. While offshore wind has been providing clean energy to other parts of the world for several decades, this industry is brand new to New Yorkers. To provide interested stakeholders and members of the public with accessible, impartial information and opportunities for engagement on specific topics of interest, NYSERDA is hosting this educational webinar series called Learning from the Experts to connect the public with independent experts in key topics in offshore wind. We endeavor to select Learning from the Expert speakers based on their expertise, not necessarily for an alignment with the opinions of NYSERDA or the state of New York. If you would like to suggest a topic or speaker for a future webinar, you can email us at offshorewind@nyserda.ny.gov or fill out a survey also available on our website in the Offshore Wind webinar series. Please note that the views and opinions expressed in this presentation are those of the presenters. Next slide, please. It is now my pleasure to introduce Mary Ford and Karl Vilacoba. Mary Ford is the Deputy Director of MARACOOS and has significant experience leading engagement in the Mid-Atlantic. MARACOOS, or the Mid-Atlantic Regional Association Coastal Ocean Observing System, collects, integrates, manages, and distributes data according to best practices as identified by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Karl Vilacoba is the Communications Director for Monmouth University Urban Coast Institute, UCI, and the project manager for the Mid-Atlantic Ocean Data Portal. Prior to joining the UCI, Karl worked for the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority as managing editor of In Transition, a national transportation magazine published in partnership with the New Jersey Institute of Technology. Karl previously spent a decade as a news reporter and editor for newspapers in the Jersey Shore area and at USA Today's Manhattan Bureau. Thank you, and I will now hand things over to our speakers.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity to walk you through MARACOOS Oceans Map. We're excited to introduce you to the tool and show how our partners contribute to this dynamic data ecosystem that we have going on in the Mid-Atlantic. I'm Mary Ford, Deputy Director of MARACOOS, and have been heavily involved in the development of our newest version of Oceans Map, which we're going to demo later. Before we walk through Oceans Map, I'm going to just talk really briefly about IUS and MARACOOS. Next slide, please. The U.S. Integrated Ocean Observing System, or IUS, is a national regional partnership working to provide new tools and forecasts, ultimately looking to improve safety, enhance the economy, and protect the environment. IUS is made up of 11 regional associations dispersed nationally and includes 17 federal partner agencies. Through IUS and our partners, integrated ocean information is available in near real time as well as retrospectively. This easier and better access to integrated data improves the ability for folks to understand and predict coastal and ocean events and interactions that happen on our coast and oceans. This access to data is really just one of the things that IUS contributes to the new blue economy. Next slide, please. So MARACOOS is the IUS Mid-Atlantic Regional Association, and we focus on the area between Cape Cod and Cape Hatteras. We are a 501c3 and are made up of different partners and stakeholders from federal, state, and local governments, nonprofits, academic institutions, and private sector companies. It's important for me to note that while we'll be showcasing our flagship data visualization tool, Oceans Map, MARACOOS and our partners are doing critical data collection and stakeholder engagement in many areas and are involved in local offshore wind data collection and projects throughout the region, including New York. Collecting these regional data and these community insights helps improve tools and products used for decision-making. And one key piece in what MARACOOS does is focus on this iterative stakeholder engagement process. And this is a process that connects the data collectors, the stakeholders, and tool developers, and ensures that unique regional data needs are being met, and data types and tools are updated as these unique needs are and the requirements change. We do take a lot of pride in our relationships and partnerships, and couldn't fill regional needs without collaborations with partners, including Marco. So integrating data from offshore wind companies and partners is a really prime example of how these public-private sector partnerships increases the equitable access to reliable, consistent, and accurate data. And this access contributes to improving resilience of coastal communities and resilience of coastal economies. Next slide, please. I mentioned that our partners and stakeholders collect a lot of data and engage in many areas. So I did just want to mention the 5 MARACOOS focus areas, which include maritime safety, fisheries and natural resources, coastal hazards, water quality, and of course, energy. These focus areas all overlap, as I'm sure you can imagine, and really help guide the MARACOOS prioritization and decision-making. Next slide, please. So in addition to collecting and integrating diverse data, we take data quality very seriously and are proud to be an officially federally certified regional association. So what is that? What that means in short is that our data is as good as or better than data you would get from federal partners, and the federal government put its stamp on that. So the certification process is transparent. It provides additional confidence in these regional products. And this confidence allows for more access to data and more efficiency in interagency and partner coordination at the state, regional, and national level. You can find out so much more if you scan this QR code. I'm also happy to answer questions about this process later or offline. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about Oceans Map. Oceans Map is a platform that's been evolving over a number of years and was developed with RPS with input from many, many key partners, including the offshore wind community. Oceans Map integrates a broad range of both centralized and third-party data services, from operational to experimental, and provides a platform for collaboration and decision-making across a range of industries and stakeholders. Over the last several years, RPS and MARACOOS have been working on integrating Oceans Map and the data services that feed into it into different workflows for various stakeholders, including offshore wind industry, the navigation community, the coastal management community, just to name a few. Next slide, please. So there's a lot going on below the surface when it comes to data collection. The diversity of data being collected to support permitting, construction, and operation of major offshore energy development is just incredible. This illustration, oh, sorry, I'm a slide behind. Can you go one more? Sorry about that. I missed my cue. Okay. So this illustration shows all the elements that go into understanding offshore conditions and providing information for stakeholders that are working offshore. You can see dozens of data sets in play, often being collected by many different entities and not always being managed centrally. So what Oceans Map does is it acts as that integrator for all of these data streams, bringing them together into one single platform that allows visual overlays, exploration of how conditions change over time, and data analysis. Next slide, please. So just want to hammer this point home again. MARACOOS and IUS are really leaders when it comes to open data sharing and data democratization. And we really do understand the importance of making a broad range of ocean data available for wider use. And we play a key role in enabling this national, regional, private partnerships to support production, integration, and communication of really high quality ocean information. I use data management protocols, and that enables us to bring all of these data together efficiently and effectively. As a community, we've adopted formats, metadata standards, controlled vocabularies, and data access services that are widely used. We have a growing community of data providers, which is really exciting, including those in the offshore wind community. And these providers know how to plug into the system. They understand the value and importance of good metadata and data standards so that data can be understood, shared, and reused as needed. Next slide, please. So I'm going to pass the torch over to my colleague, Sherry Schwartz from RPS, who will give you a very brief demo of OceansMap. The demo will really barely scratch the surface of capabilities and applications. So I do want to encourage anyone interested to reach out after the fact. We're happy to do a more customized demo or answer any questions. So you can take it away, Sherry.
Thank you so much, Mary, and thank you for that excellent overview of MARACOOS and OceansMap. Hello, everybody. My name is Sherry Schwartz. I'm a project manager at RPS Group, and I've been involved in the development of OceansMap for a couple of years now. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to provide you with a demo of OceansMap. All right, and can you all see my screen? I could get.
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. All right, so MARACOOS OceansMap is a web-based application for searching, displaying, and performing analysis of data. It allows us to explore data temporally and spatially, and we can model real-time data visualizations as well as forecasts and hindcasts. So when you first open the portal, the map will display automatically initially, and it will initially load a few data layers by default as well. So the application opens with a few icons over here in the top right. Can you see my mouse hovering over these icons? I'm worried I might have the wrong screen shared.
Oh, we can see your mouse.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. All right, so we have a few icons over here in the top right. We also have some icons on the left side of the screen and a time slider on the bottom that allows us to just navigate through time for our data. So I'm going to go through just these top right icons briefly at first. So the first one is the share this view, and this will generate a short permalink, which is customizable so that you can choose to preserve specific options, such as maybe the time or the data layers that you want to select, any virtual stations or custom layers you may want to include as well. You would simply click Create URL, and then you can copy this to your clipboard. You can paste it into a new browser, maybe paste it into an email to share with a colleague, or even bookmark it to come back to it later. We also have a screenshot tool, which allows us to just take a quick screenshot as a PDF, and we can save some notes. The animation tool allows us to create an MP4 of the data over time, and we can change that date range. We can also change our frame time, which allows us to either speed up or maybe slow down the pace of our video. And we do also, OceansMap will use cookies with your browser to save any animations you've created in the past 30 days that you can access again later. So they will appear in this dropdown. I don't have anything saved right now, but we do hold those for 30 days on our server, and then you can download them onto your machine to save them beyond that time. Next is our Activate Hover tooltip, which allows us to really turn our mouse into a pointer where we can just point at the data layer perhaps and pull up some information without really having to click on that data. We also have a Measure Distances tool, which turns our mouse into this crosshair symbol, and we can click on the map, maybe double click when we're done and we want to measure that distance, and it will generate our distance in meters. And then we would just click this icon again or press escape when we're done with that tool. Next, we have a zoom to box tool. So we can zoom on our map with the scroll wheel on our mouse, or we can select this tool and then drag a box on the map and it will zoom into that spot for us. And then the last tool up here is our legend, which of course indicates for us how to interpret the data and all the visualizations that we're seeing on our map as well. Now, the tools on the left side of the screen really allow us to start to dig into the data and start analyzing it more in depth. So for example, we might want to start just by updating our base map, which is that underlying appearance of our map. So we have our default topographic map, of course, but we also have some satellite imagery, a couple of grayscale options here. We can also show maritime information, coastlines if we need to. And we have this pretty cool globe view that is new, which I will share with you in just a few minutes as well. When we're ready to dive into our data, we can do that by opening our data catalog in this top left icon. You'll notice that there's this badge here that shows the number 3. That is indicating how many data layers we have active at the moment. And then within our data catalog, all of our data layers are organized into categories, which are collapsible and expandable. And then under each category, we have a list of available data sets that can be visualized. And each of these names will give some insight into the information for that data, such as the geographic location, maybe the parameters we're looking at, and even the source as well. There are also a couple or about 3 icons next to each data layer. The info icon will pull up some more summary information and like an abstract for more details. It'll also have a data access link. Sometimes there's a link to the data source itself. The gear icon allows us to change our settings, so we can maybe change the opacity of our layer. We have a few color palette options here in Oceans Map, and we can also change the color range for our legend as well. And then this magnifier icon will tell Oceans Map to just fly us directly to the spot where that data set is located. There are also a few ways to kind of filter out data and search for the data that you might need. You'll notice we do have quite a few data sets in here, so kind of scrolling through could be a little bit time consuming. So one way you might want to speed that up is if you know you're looking for temperature data, for example, you could type temp into the search bar and it'll filter out anything not related to temperature. Then just click or hit the backspace on your keyboard or click the X button to see that full catalog again. We can also use the active button to filter out anything that is not currently active. Again, just click that button to view the full catalog. And then the map view filter will remove anything that is not available in our map's current view. All right, so let's start really digging into some data in Oceans Map. I'm going to start, first I want to turn off the layers that loaded by default. So I'll click this eye icon and I'll turn everything off. Then I think I want to turn on my Equinor and my Atlantic Shores data. I also want to pull up just a couple GIS layers so I can see maybe these vessel transit counts of the high density, where areas where there's higher density vessel traffic, the wind energy lease areas from BOEM as well, just to give us some context. And then I want to start looking at some of these platforms here. So maybe we'll pick the Beacon Wind LiDAR buoy, which as it indicates in this pop-up is real-time data. And once I clicked on that station, it did open the bottom drawer in Oceans Map for me. And you'll notice that we have this list of parameters on the left side. So we can select a few of these, perhaps wave height and wind speed. And when I select them, Oceans Map will draw my data for me over time on this time series plot on the right. And you'll also notice we have our legend down here on the bottom, which we can change these colors if we'd like to. Now, if we just wanted to kind of see how this data changes over time, we can do that with this time slider functionality. You may have noticed that it automatically loaded with a couple days in the past, today, and then a couple days in the future. And so we can click around on this time slider and it will pull up the updated data for the time that we've selected. We can also navigate using these arrows to move forward or backward in time as well. But if we wanted to look at a completely different time range, maybe like a week in June, we can do that by clicking on this calendar icon and opening our set time range here. And then we would just need to navigate to the time frame we're looking for, select our start and end date, and it will update that for us. All right, now I want to look at some model data as well. So maybe we'll look at some wind model. I'll pick the CONUS North America 12 kilometer. And now that I'm looking at my model data, I don't need to see my wave height. I'm done looking at that right now. I just want to look at the wind speed from my buoy. But I also want to make sure I'm looking at my model data on this time series graph as well. So I do need to scroll down to the bottom of this table and select it. This is a very light pink color, so maybe I'll just make it a darker red. make it more visible. And now I can kind of start to compare my data from the observation and the models to see how similar they might be. But if we wanted to do maybe a more in-depth error analysis, we can do that with our validation tool. The validation tool is this icon over here on the left sidebar. If I click here, it's going to give me a blank form that I need to fill out, where I would put in the parameter I'm looking at, the observation station, and my comparison. I've already done a lot of this work by loading my data in the overview and in this time series plot. So I can actually just go over here and click validate, and it will automatically pull in most of this information for me. All I need to do now is just remind it what model I want to compare to. So I'll pick the same one. I'll click calculate, and then it generates this error statistics table for me. I also have a scatter plot that is comparing the observation data on the y-axis, or I'm sorry, the model data on the y-axis with the observation data on the x-axis. And of course, we have our time series plot down here on the bottom once more. And then as a side note here, we can download each of these plots, as well as the plot on the bottom drawer as a CSV, image, or PDF file. All right, so I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into another one of our tools. So we do have this traffic light tool. Now I've actually used the permalink feature that I mentioned earlier to pull up an example already and have it ready to go. So that's what I have here in this tab. So the traffic light tool really allows us to perform a multivariate Boolean analysis by setting up a conditional rule that adds a color layer to our data and just allows us to really understand it spatially. So in this example, we are trying to use the traffic light tool to assess safety conditions or to assess the environmental conditions for safety and determine if we can send offshore wind crews out into this Hudson Canyon energy area. And this, we dropped a virtual station here as a representative of a potential maybe location for a turbine. So if we want to send a crew here to do some maintenance or some blade inspections, this could be a really handy tool to decide when conditions are safe. So what we've done to set this up is we set the rules so that we see green on the map anywhere where wave height is less than 1.25 meters and winds are less than 8 meters per second. So anywhere we see green, conditions are likely safe to send out a crew and do some maintenance. Yellow is where conditions start to get a little iffy. And then red is where waves are above 1.5 meters or winds are above 10 meters per second. And in these areas, we maybe don't want to send anyone out there if we had anything. We also have our traffic light down here in the time series plot, so we can use the traffic light not just spatially, but also temporally. And we can see in our time series plot, this is looking at this Hudson Canyon location with the station that I've created. And we can see down here that, on July 17th at 2 a.m., conditions really weren't very safe. And it kind of started to change around 2 p.m. that day. It started to look like it was getting a little bit better. And then at 8 p.m. until today, and even going into the next couple of days, conditions are forecasted to be pretty green. So it might be a good time to be sending out some crews. All right. Oceans Map can also be very useful for understanding our outlook for storms, even for hurricane season. So here I have that 3D globe view that I promised with some Navy sea surface temperature data loaded. And because warmer waters can increase hurricane activity, this can be pretty helpful to view where we may be seeing warming waters. But we can also, it doesn't really tell us if these temperatures that we're seeing in the middle are really normal for this time of year. So we do have a GOES 16 SST anomaly, which is a mid-Atlantic data set. And it's showing us red where temperatures are actually warmer than normal and blue where they're colder than normal. So it can provide a little extra information that way as well. And then I also have another example because we can do some exploring of storms and kind of storm outlook and understanding how they might impact our coastal communities with more than just temperature, right? We can also look at waves and winds. So in this example, I've set some global winds, which are these streamlines, animated streamlines that we're seeing. And then the heat map is wave height, and the lighter blue colors are where we're seeing higher waves than maybe the darker purples. So this is pretty.
Interrupt you for 1 second. Sorry,
Sure.
We're running over our time a bit. And this is why I say, like, this demo is really barely scratching the surface. If you have any any final points, that'd be awesome. But if folks want to explore this more with us, we're happy to do so. later, for sure. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. Thank you for letting me know. I'll just mention really quickly my last two examples. So we do have a compare mode that can allow us to compare data from different layers or at different times. This one is just looking at a global data set on the right and a regional data set on the left. So you may see some changes to the resolution and some changes in the Gulf Stream as well. And then in my last example, this is actually our dashboard view. So when you're in Oceans Map, you'll see an icon up here that says dashboard view. In the dashboard, it says map view. And you can add widgets and plots and just really create the however you'd like to deep dive and analyze into your data. So I just have some live conditions for waves and winds, as well as forecasts and a time series plot down here. That's all for my demo.
Thanks so much, Sherry. I think we're going to pass it over to Karl now.
Hello, everybody. Again, I'm Karl Vilacoba, and I am the Communications Director for Monmouth University's Urban Coast Institute, which is located about a mile from the beach here on the Jersey Shore, and I'm the Project Manager for the Mid-Atlantic Ocean Data Portal. Next. The Mid-Atlantic is a very busy place offshore, and it's getting busier all the time. And as this map shows, you've got very thick vessel traffic coming in and out of the busiest port in America as of the last couple of years, I believe. Heavy commercial fishing activity, recreational boating. It's the nexus of undersea telecommunications cables for the country. And in the very near future, or depending on where you live, existing now, are offshore wind turbines. And what the portal does is show how all of these different things relate to each other, or in some cases, how they conflict with one another, so that people who are in ocean management roles can make more informed decisions. Next. What's on the portal? Currently, about 6,000 different map layers organized under about a dozen themes, focused on long-range data on ocean issues. And, that's different from the Oceans Map, which is chiefly focused on real-time data, and we can get more into that in a little bit and show the relationships between them. We've got some tools for users to collaborate together in groups and save some of their data, and some instructional and educational resources, such as a blog that tells you what's new and latest and how to use it, a story map function called Ocean Stories, a calendar, and we do a lot of outreach, including semi-monthly webinars. Next. The portal team currently is Monmouth University's UCI, where I sit, Rutgers University, Duke, EcoTrust, our developer out of Portland, Oregon, and we work under the guidance of the Mid-Atlantic Regional Council on the Ocean, or MARCO. Next. For those who aren't familiar, MARCO is a consortium of the 5 states from New York down through Virginia, formed in 2009 to collaborate on ocean issues. And you can visit midatlanticocean.org to find out more about MARCO. It is currently chaired by Maryland. Next. One of the things that the portal did was gather a whole lot of information that was scattered in many different government agencies and possessions, and brought it under one umbrella and curated to really focus purely on things that would be of interest to users in the Mid-Atlantic region. And we take a lot of data from the marine cadastre, which is super important and useful for a lot of baseline data that covers the entire United States coast. We work very closely with our counterparts in New England, NROC, which has the Northeast Ocean Data Portal, to create especially a lot of the bigger data sets that we have for fishing, for marine life, recognizing that fish don't know where the Mid-Atlantic begins and one state ends, and in fact, a whole lot of economic activity really crosses over those borders as well. So it makes a lot of sense. And we serve a lot of data to the states, and in some cases, use some of it on our portal. Forward a little bit. Hit the, yep. And as of, I believe, last year, we have a agreement in place with MARACOOS. We always work together closely, but now it's formalized that we would work together on data sharing, and we basically work with MARACOOS to take a lot of that real-time data and form longer range planning products around it. So for example, you could go to the oceans map right now to find out what the sea surface temperatures are off Long Island in one specific location. We would take, say, a decade or more of that data, average it out to create a series of maps that show averages for each month throughout the Mid-Atlantic. So it's been very good, I think, for all of us involved. Next. A couple of examples of how the portal is used. Offshore wind, obviously, agencies have used it to design lease areas in ways that avoid conflicts with users such as shipping, commercial fishing. It's been used for permitting applications, environmental analyses by consultants. Stakeholders use it all the time to inform their public comments on agency actions. And it's helped site infrastructure like turbine locations and cable routes. There's many others, but safe to say, offshore wind has been a major driver of what we've added to the portal. Next. Submarine cables. A lot of people would think that in this wireless world that would be a thing of the past, but they still carry a good 98% or so of all of the overseas communications traffic, including internet. And some of the blue lines that you can see coming out of that Virginia Beach area right there are cables that were financed by Google, Microsoft, and Facebook to carry that high-speed internet traffic. And the portal was used to help. If you know Virginia Beach, it's the largest naval base in the world, and there's a lot of naval training sites that you need to be out of the way of. There is a lot of commercial fishing, shipwrecks, areas where munitions have been dumped over time, and all of that to help design an alignment that would kind of thread that needle and get safely to shore in a way that would minimize the chance of something happening that would damage those cables. Next. The Coast Guard has used it for a series of port access route studies, really thinking about with offshore wind coming, with planned infrastructure upgrades at the ports, climate change and so forth, what routing measures, including fairways, anchorage areas, will be necessary to accommodate traffic in the future. And so the portal and its data was helped to create and draft some of those recommendations and to help drive a lot of the public comment on it. The Federal Register notices referred people to the portal to check these out for themselves, and people then took portal maps and helped explain some of the things that they were seeing in their comments. Next. We've all been very excited and happy to see the resurgence of humpback whales off the coast. But as someone I know once explained it, it's kind of like having children playing in the middle of the Garden State Turnpike. And a lot of research has been done and is being done on potential areas where vessel strike risks are highest and helping do public outreach around that. We worked with the whale watch operators from throughout the Mid-Atlantic coast to develop a map that shows their key areas and where they see whales. So we continue to do that work and update those maps. Next. And finally, we did not foresee education necessarily being a major use of the portal when we started it, but it has been. It's grown more and more as a classroom tool, and we're excited to help accommodate that. Here are some pictures of engagements I've done, including an annual one I do for teachers at the New York Aquarium to help them figure out how the portal can be used for the marine science classes and science and so forth. Next. And finally, echoing what Mary said, I've only got a few minutes to gloss over the portal, but we're always happy to do a demo that can help show your agency or company how it might be more useful to you. Can everybody see that? Assuming we're good to go. This is the portal homepage, portal.midatlanticocean.org, if you'd like to follow along. And I'll go straight to the mapping application, which we call Marine Planner. You can click Map right up there on the top. And I think with the few minutes I have, I'll run through the themes that we have here and give you sort of a flavor of what's within them and what you can find on the portal. And I'll start a little bit out of order with renewable energy. And this data we have organized basically from least to furthest along in these 4 folders right here. So the first one, planning and lease areas. You can find the BOEM active renewable energy lease areas, actually our number 1 most often clicked layer on the portal. There's some others in there, offshore projects under review. So we have project envelopes for a lot of the different energy areas, plus stuff like the proposed turbine locations, cable routes. I can zoom in a bit so you can see this more closely. And then finally, well, I should say permitted projects that are under construction or close, and the few operational projects in Block Island and Virginia and their associated infrastructure. And with that, you can activate any of these 6,000 different layers in combination. Administrative is chiefly government boundaries. So things like the OCS lease blocks you can find here, or where federal waters begin and state ends and those kinds of things. And I'll point out the legend tab up here. You can consult to get an idea of what it is that you're looking at. And the active tab allows you to manipulate what you're seeing. So if you wanted to mute that OCS lease blocks one, if you wanted to make it darker or lighter, you could do that. To close it out, the green eye icon tells you a snapshot, more information about that layer. And there's sometimes some quick links in there if you wanted to download the data or get to the source of it. Each of these at the very end, you can click read more for the data catalog entry that has everything that you would need to know about it. And you can slide these up and down to decide which ones are on top and which one get most prominence. Click on the X's to get rid of anything, and click clear all layers if you'd like to do that to start fresh. Fishing, I think 2 main collections I'd like to just point out: VMS, Vessel Monitoring System, which is by catch type, by fishery, and shows it's electronically tracked fishing vessel locations in these different time periods. So for example, herring 2015 through 16. And you can compare that with vessel trip report, VTR data, which we also call our communities at sea data. And this is by gear type. So I'll click dredge 2011 through 15. And that will give you a picture of, for example, scallop, surf clam. And we call them communities at sea because you can click on the map for a pop-up that will tell you which communities depended on that area at sea, which could be very useful for when you're doing outreach and you want to know if you're making a decision related to this area. Yeah, we better talk to people in Atlantic City and Barnegat and Rhode Island and so forth. You can also search with the by port data to, if you, for example, you see Point Pleasant highlighted here, where did they go to specifically? What of this whole cloud that you see was theirs? And that shows 90% of their effort in that time period. Close out of that. Marine life. We have bird data, fish, marine mammals. So for example, you can see these different categories here. Baleen whale abundance. I'll start with that. And this will give you that full picture for the entire year. But scrolling down in the marine life library, I mentioned we had 6,000 data layers. About half of them are right here. The individual species data, which is available by season and in a lot of cases by month, like for the marine mammals. So for here, instead of finding just baleen whales, you can search for humpbacks. And you can say, where are they in July? And let me get rid of that last layer. And there you see it. Maritime, a lot of our human use data, vessel transit count data for over a decade. So you can do it by all that carry AIS transponders, or you can check by cargo vessel and several other different vessel types. Oceanography, here is where our MARACOOS partnership data comes in. So this theme really shows all of the physical characteristics of the ocean. But we have one, for example, bottom temperature slider. And with this, you can click the button to automatically animate through the different months and see how it changes. Or you can click pause and manually toggle through them. Beneath that, recreation data, stuff like, here they are, just added today, between the time that we started this webinar and now, our boat ramps and coastal water trails data by state. You guys are getting the first look of anybody at this. A lot of ocean data, but we thought something like this could be really useful for recreation and, for example, knowing where cable landings are coming to shore, who the different recreational users are in these areas. Seafloor habitat pretty much contains what it sounds like it would. And here is, for example, where we have our collection of bathymetry data. And that's taking a minute to load there. I will just reload Marine Planner. Looks like I've got about 2 minutes left. Security, a lot of declassified naval data here. So areas where you can see here where munitions were dumped, danger zones and restricted areas, places where they carry out their exercises throughout the year. Socioeconomic data, a lot of that is by county, showing how much that different industries rely on the ocean. And finally, water quality. And here is where we would find a lot of our partnership with MARACOOS and through MACAN to show ocean acidification monitoring sites as part of MACAN's work to figure out where there's gaps in that coverage and what's needed and so forth. So it looks like I've got about 1 minute left, and I'll just quickly point out the My Planner tab. You do have some options here to bookmark your maps. If you wanted to save this and share it with people, you could do that by creating a bookmark for it. The Shapes tool allows you to draw shapes or import your own shape files if you have them and save them on the portal. And user imported layers is a tool that allows you, if there is some data layer that you don't see on the portal and you know what the service is for it, you can ingest that on the portal, save it in your data. You do have to be a registered user, which is free. You just need an email. But that is, I think, where I'll stop with about 15 minutes left of this to go.
Thank you, Carl and Mary and Sherry. That was a great demonstration of both of the data portals. And we do have some questions, but maybe I'll start with a logistics one, since Mary, you offered further demonstrations if people are interested, and just how should people reach out to both of these portals for additional questions, or if you have a problem using it, who is the best person to contact?
No, yeah, it's a great question. So for the MARACOOS portal, you can contact me, and I can put it in the chat, and it's also in the slides. My email is mary@maracoos.org. And then I'm guessing that Carl is the right person to contact at Marco.
That is correct. My personal email is right there on the screen, but also on the footer of the portal is an email, portal@midatlanticocean.org. And I get that, and I promise you, if you do email that, I'll get back to you quickly.
Great. And I think we also put the websites of both of the data portals in the chat for folks if they want to go start exploring them immediately. We do have some other questions. Actually, Mary, first, a compliment that Ocean Maps is amazing. Just can maybe both of you talk about, are there data portals like this that help with offshore wind on the West Coast or the Great Lakes?
So from the MARACOOS perspective, yes. So that's where I use all the regional associations. We work really closely together, and we have colleagues on the West Coast and in the Great Lakes that all have different data portals. With that said, we also collaborate on offshore wind specifically together. So it might not be specifically Oceans Map on the West Coast right now, but there are definitely contacts out there that I can send you to if you want to, if this person wants to reach out to me to ask that question.
Thank you.
And I'll add that there is a West Coast portal, and the Mid-Atlantic portal shares the same developer, EcoTrust, and Ryan Hodges, who does that work. It has been dormant for a long time, for several years, but they are really now gearing up to add a lot to it and bring it up to speed, especially now with offshore wind really advancing off that coast.
Yeah, thanks. You've talked about how offshore wind has kind of been a driving factor in some of the types of data that's being included in these data portals. Can you talk a little bit more about how you choose which data is included where, and are there specific portals that people should go to for specific topics?
Mary, you want to take that one first, or me?
Sure. So we have a number of different focus areas, which I mentioned in my presentation. And we have a number of different stakeholders and drivers. Obviously, everything goes together. The long story short is like, it kind of depends, right? Like we have a work plan for the year, but as certain things come up, we really are driven by stakeholder needs more than anything else. So the best answer I can give is, if you want data, if there's something that's missing, let us know and we'll figure out a way to include it.
I'll say that with our portal, Marco has a work group called the Ocean Mapping Data Team, the OMDT, which also has a lot of federal agencies. MARACOOS sits on that. And that is, I would say, our number one source of direction in terms of the voices of the states are really well represented on there. And so when there are state needs, when the agencies know of data that we don't have that would really make sense, we work with them to make that a reality. But also, we do so much engagement and outreach like this, but also specific trainings for organizations. And I think the questions that we get as we're doing those, and the things people tell us about, well, I'd use the portal a lot more if you had A, B, C, or D. We listen very closely to that, and we're really open to anything going on the portal if it would make sense and help our users. So if anyone's watching this and has an idea of data that really does belong on there, we're all ears. And in terms of the second half of that question about other tools, I would encourage everybody to, check out the state portals. And the states, by and large, all have a lot of interesting GIS products. You may not know where they are and have to look around a little bit. But for starters, New York State has a great portal of its own, the State Geographic Information Gateway, which was just really revamped recently. And the portal, we are on September 19th as part of our own How Tuesday webinar series, are having Jeff Herder from New York, who is going to present the gateway and talk about some of the upgrades that they've been working on. And that will be on the 19th, as I said. And if you go to our calendar page, you can find out information and how to register for that.
Thanks, and a good shout out for the Department of State data portal. It really is a really useful tool. Can you talk a little bit about, so obviously offshore wind developers are using these databases to help inform different parts of their projects. Are they also providing data back to these databases, and are there any requirements for them to share data?
So I can start with this. So there's no requirements at the moment for offshore wind providers to give us information. We do have a number of MOUs in place with a couple of groups that have been freely sharing data with us, which is fantastic. If I will say for the MARACOOS portal, if the data is shared with us, it is accessible to everybody. So there's no like login or you can't keep it private kind of thing. There are other options, I think, with RPS or other companies to create more private portal things. But as far as MARACOOS, the MARACOOS Oceans Map is concerned, any data that's shared with us is publicly accessible because that's what we do. But yes, there's no requirement at the time. We're trying to work on that and build that in with certain agreements, but we do have a number of MOUs with companies who really do want to share data and participate in this data ecosystem so that we can all make better decisions.
Yeah, on our portal side, I'd say there have been a lot of discussions to that end. Probably more have been had with MARACOOS. But it's something that I think we'll see a lot more of in the future and is on the way.
Great. Kind of a follow-up on that one. Do you know anything about confidentiality periods, or how how long does it take from data being collected to it actually going on to some of these data portals? Some of it is real-time data, or is it longer? Does it take longer for data to be uploaded?
Again, I think my answer is it depends for the MARACOOS side. If we can get things on quickly and the company is ready to share it, like sometimes it's a really quick turnaround. Sherry, you can interrupt me and and disagree with me on that. But sometimes it's a really quick turnaround, especially if metadata is all in line and everything. If companies don't want us to share it for a certain period, then we won't make it live until that confidentiality period is done. But nobody else can see it. They wouldn't be able to see it either at that point.
On our end, I'd say confidentiality really comes into play probably most with the fishing data. The VMS, the VTR data, that all takes a while to get processed and get cleared because everybody has to make sure that there's nothing in there that could allow somebody to basically track, what one specific vessel is doing, or, and snoop on one business or anything like that. So that all has to be filtered out when you use the Communities at Sea data or the VTR. You just see that that broad view of where everybody has been and not necessarily where one or a few specific vessels are going.
Thank you. I guess I suggested in one of the earlier questions that offshore wind developers are probably some of the users of these data portals, but could you talk about other users and how they're using this information to make decisions about offshore wind? And I know that there's partnerships with some of the regional organizations that are creating science plans around understanding offshore wind impacts to wildlife and fisheries. Can you just talk a little bit about more the users who are tapping into these data portals?
Sure, Carl, you want to go first?
Sure. I kind of ran through that in my slide a bit, but it is a big mix. Agencies, obviously, um, all kinds of stakeholders. So you see fishers and their representatives who are using it to show areas that they want to make sure are known, are very important to them and considered through these processes. We have done a lot of direct trainings for wind companies and their staff so that they know what's available and can be used. So uh, there's quite a lot of different users out there. The Coast Guard, I should mention. It's a lot of different groups.
Yeah, very similar. I mean, I think we have similar. What's really great about the MARACOOS portal and the MARCO portal is that we have similar users, and our portals are so different and complementary. Like it's really quite awesome. Coast Guard uses our data quite often. Offshore wind developers are. It's not new is not the right word, but an evolving group of users and how we can tailor the portals or different instances of the portal to work with them. The maritime groups are really using both of our portals quite a bit, I believe, the maritime commerce groups. So it's really, both portals are like very, very broadly applicable to many different circumstances. We were just talking to charter boat captains the other day, so.
And I think that we have time for one more question before we wrap up. Can maybe just quickly, can you talk a little bit about the certification for data standards? I think you mentioned, Mary.
Yes, so I put that QR code, which I think you're going to send the slides out of this for this. But what happened was all of these regional portals popped up in the IUS regions, and people were not trusting the data that were coming in because, you know, they trust NOAA and they trust National Weather Service, which is understandable. And so all these like other portals are popping up and they're just like, oh, whatever, like, should we use this data or not? So IUS went through this really, really rigorous process, and we have to do it every 5 years. Yeah, every 5 years, not 4 years, every 5 years. We have to go through this process to make sure that the data we're collecting is as good as or better than federal data standards, to the point where if somebody uses our data that's federally certified and the decision is bad, like NOAA lawyers will hop in and help deal with that. So we're like very, very federally certified. And this is really important because it does give that trust to the regional data, which, as you all know, the Mid-Atlantic region is such a like dynamic, interesting area. That having that detailed regional unique data is important. And the fact that it's like federally certified and federally backed is even awesome.
Thank you. That time flew by. So next slide, please. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us for for this Learning from the Experts webinar. A reminder that the webinar recording and presentation slides will be available on NYSERDA's website. Our next webinar in the series will be on August 23rd. Experts from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and Duke University will discuss research and regulations for marine mammal interactions with offshore wind. And then on September 27th, 2 experts will discuss how to tap into the offshore wind supply chain. You can register for future webinars through our experts page at win.ny.gov. And if you have any requests for future topics or you would like to hear more about the series, please email us at offshorewind@nyserda.ny.gov or fill out our Learning from the Experts survey posted on our website. And thank you again for joining us today, and see you next time.